Okay, thank you. Okay, good evening. This is a regularly scheduled meeting, the Wilmette Zoning Board of Appeals. Ms. Roberts, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Felkoff.
Here.
Mr. Glettard.
Here.
Ms. Norick.
Here.
Mr. Pelleton. Primary series muted.
Here.
Ms. Irvin.
Here.
Chairman Schneider.
Here. This meeting is being conducted remotely via Microsoft Teams. For those watching this video in the future, the state of Illinois is currently under stay-at-home order issued by Governor Pritzker due to the coronavirus global pandemic. As a result, all in-person governmental meetings have been canceled. However, the Open Meetings Act now permits electronic meetings of governmental bodies like the Zoning Board of Appeals, and this evening we're conducting our business in compliance with the state law.
Are you on there?
As usual, this meeting is being broadcast live on our local cable access channel 6.
Recording and starting meeting is being recorded.
Excuse me, is someone interrupting here? It is also being broadcast on the internet on YouTube Live, and the URL for that is www.youtube.com/user/village-of-Wilmette/live. To participate in the meeting, you can join through Microsoft Teams. Visit the village's website at www.wilmette.com and find the calendar event for the zoning board meeting. There's a link for you to join the meeting. You will also find the meeting agenda and case reports under the calendar. Alternatively, you can view the meeting on channel 6 or on YouTube and call in to the meeting, allowing you to listen and speak using your telephone. The phone number is 872-239-8225. Tonight's meeting code is 901-529-648#. You may also submit your comments through YouTube Live and emails to comdev@wilmette.com. A member of the village staff will read your comment to the zoning board. All comments to the Zoning Board of Appeals will be recorded in the meeting minutes as we typically do. For our meeting guests joining by Teams, when you are not speaking, please keep your device muted to minimize disruption of the proceedings and your video turned off so that the board members can be seen. For those of you new to our proceedings, the purpose of this board is to hear evidence on applications for variances from our zoning ordinance and on applications for special use. Based upon the evidence we hear this evening, we will make recommendation to the village board of trustees as to whether the applications that come before us this evening should be granted or denied. We will vote to recommend granting or denying each application for variation based on whether the application meets the standards of review set forth in section 5.4.f of our village ordinance. Applications for special use will be considered based on whether the standards of review set forth in section 5.3.e of our village ordinance are met. The village board of trustees will consider the recommendations we make this evening at their next scheduled meeting on January 26, 2021. Our recommendations to the board are advisory only. The village board has final say on all applications and will make its own determination as to whether to grant or deny them. The village board is not legally bound by our recommendation. There's one small exception to this rule. If this board makes a negative recommendation with respect to an application, in order for the village board of trustees to approve that application, a supermajority of 5 village board members must vote to approve it rather than a simple majority of 4. There's one other small peculiarity to our proceedings of which you should be aware. The board does not operate by majority vote. We operate instead by a tyranny of four. In other words, no matter how many board members are present on a given evening, in order to get a positive recommendation from this board, an applicant must receive four affirmative votes. Ordinarily, we consist of 7 members. Tonight, 1 member is absent. So we have 6 members, so you'll need 4 of the 6 to approve a recommendation or recommend approval of a recommendation. In recognition of this, that the fact that we don't have a full complement of members tonight, we give the applicants who are scheduled to come before us this night the option of requesting a continuance to the next available date on our schedule. The next available date for any applicant who would like to request a continuance this evening is February 3rd, 2021. There's no penalty for asking for a continuance. No such request will be held against you when your case is eventually heard. If you wish to ask for a continuance, however, you must do so at the beginning of your presentation before making any substantive arguments as to the merits of your case. Please also be aware that if you request a continuance, there's no guarantee as to how many board members will be present on the evening to which your case is continued. The cases we shall hear this evening will be heard in the order set forth in the published agenda. When your case is called, please state your name and address and tell us exactly why your application meets the standards of review that are applicable to it. Each member of this board is a longtime resident of the village, has visited your property during the past week. In addition, we have received from village staff a report containing all written information that you have submitted in support of your application, as well as any other correspondence that the village has received. Accordingly, it is not necessary for you to repeat what you have already said or stated in writing. Please just hit the high points with particular attention to why you believe your application meets the standards of review. After the applicant has had a chance to speak, we will open the floor to others who wish to speak on the application. I will recognize each attendee to ask if you have a comment, so please wait to be called. Everyone will be permitted to have their say, but we would ask that you keep your comments as short and to the point as possible. Any comments received through the YouTube chat, team chat, or email will be read into the record at this time. After we have heard all oral presentations, I will close the evidence, and the members of the board will discuss what they have heard and take a vote. Once the evidence is closed, no further testimony on an application may be offered. The only people entitled to speak during that part of the proceedings will be the members of the board. This meeting is a legal proceeding, and all testimony tonight must be given under oath. If you are here and planning to testify tonight, I would ask you to raise your right hand at this time and be sworn. Do you swear or affirm that you will tell the truth in the testimony that you're about to give? If so, please say, I do.
I do.
Ms. Roberts, will you please call the first case of the evening?
Our first case is 2020 Z3 1141 Sheridan Road. This is a request for a 6.22-foot side yard adjoining a street, spa setback variation, and a variation from the requirement that a spa not be located between a principal building and a street. And our applicants are here.
Good evening. Please go ahead.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you very much for your time. So we believe that the variances that we're requesting are reasonable and meets the section code, and I can go through why. The first is the practical difficulty and hardship. So I think if you came to the property, you probably saw that it's an odd-shaped lot. It looks like a home plate, and that the what's basically our backyard is actually categorized as a side yard. But for our purposes and practical purposes, it's really our backyard, and that's where we want to put the spa, right next to existing patio. Okay. And that's because it's more private than the conforming location. The conforming location is actually on the other side of the driveway, farther from the back door. It's over 50 feet from the back door and crosses the driveway, and which is less safe for our kids.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah, so she's highlighting there the conforming location. If you see on the right where the existing patio is, where the furniture is, we're asking to put it in that corner, which would have two sides of it would be covered and hidden by the house itself. So it sits flush to the existing sunroom. Also adjacent, or also near our back door. So this is what we consider the back of our house, right? And along the existing patio. On the side facing Greenwood, there's a whole bunch of 12-foot plus arbs. And then along the side facing 7th Street, there's 10-foot arbs. We said 8 in the report, but they're well over 8 if you've come and seen the property. It's our intention, and we've put in a request for a fence permit to leave those arbs and put the fence around them on the inside near the patio there, because that's how the property sits, and then on the outside, so that it'll be fenced in with a 4-foot conforming fence. And it'll be hidden by both the bushes that are there and the house itself. In addition to what Darren mentioned, I think that we met with somebody who kind of came by, we saw them. During this winter months with Sheridan, we actually we only have lived in the house for less than a month. We bought it and closed on December 11th. And so we've actually already had a car come off Sheridan and cross our front lawn. And so this, what you see, yeah, thank you, Lisa. So that right there where you see Sheridan curves and a car came up on our lawn. We don't know, we weren't here at the time or didn't know it happened, but there's tire tracks that go up from the street, up across the patio. So it's a hazard. And so kind of that adds to the fact that we can't consider this, what the village considers our front lawn, we can't really use for our kids to play in. We don't feel like it's safe. I mean, we like where we live. We bought the house. We're happy with it. But we want a place for our 4 teenage kids to hang out and play basketball, badminton, that kind of stuff in that backyard area, which is what's conforming, and put the hot tub in what we feel is a more private area for us and our neighbors, and what we feel is our backyard.
That's what I mentioned to you, Dieter, when you were here. I think it was, that's what I showed you when you were here.
Right.
Pointed out.
In addition to that, so none of this, so other items on this list, none of these things were created by us. We purchased the house this way, with the, odd shaped lot and how the house sits on the lot. What else did we not mention?
I think one other thing
Yeah.
is, if we put it in the conforming location, it's right next to the driveway, and it's much less private. You'll be able to see it from the street.
Yeah,
right?
there's no way for us to shade it except for building a fence or something like that, because thank you.
Yeah, perfect.
So as you see, so the conforming location is where Lisa's showing you. And so because our driveway is there, we're going to put a gate there and a sliding gate door, but you're always going to be able to see through that gate.
Right,
and unless we want a variance for a gate that, you can't see through, I mean, you've got natural beauty that already protects the privacy of it. So,
and if you flip to the other picture, Lisa, please, is the other picture shows the proposed location.
Yeah, right.
Which is just
You
a
can't
wall
even
of
see
trees,
it.
right?
Yeah. And there's 2 different ones, one from that angle and then one from Greenwood, which is the next one. Yeah. And one more, that's 7th. Those are 2 different 7th, and that's Greenwood.
Right.
So that's from Sheridan and Greenwood.
And so we didn't know what, all these dimensions and stuff when we bought the house, nor when Chalet came in. It just naturally fits right next to the patio and the house, and what we assumed would be our backyard. So that's why we're coming to the board for this relief.
Yeah, we are merging our families, so this is a special house for us. And we had already made a decision before we even found a house that we were going to get a hot tub because we both suffer from long-term different kinds of injuries. I've done a bunch of Ironmans and marathons, and Darren had a back injury from when he was young. And so we were looking forward to having a hot tub in our backyard, and that was going to be part of our gift for our new house. So for us, it's really important. And we have 4 teenagers, and I think, Lisa, we even sent a picture of it. Somebody asked what it looks like.
We just sent that recently.
We sent that.
That was, you know.
And so while we can put it in the conforming location, we'd much prefer to put it here. We think it's better for the neighborhood. We think it's better for us. I know our neighbors would prefer it. We only have one neighbor, and that is really because of the weird lot shape. Well, and then the other neighbors have a hot tub.
And the other thing is, I think the proposed location is actually farther from the neighbors. Usually that's not true in your backyard, but for us, because we're surrounded by streets, is the spot we're proposing is farther from everybody. If we put it in the sorry, I'm directional. It's right back here. It's right back here. It would be closer to our neighbor's house. It's conforming, but it's still closer to their house. Whereas over the proposed location, it's not.
Good. Thank you.
And actually, one of them wrote a letter. Actually, one of the neighbors that lives
in support of us.
Support of us, right?
Yes, we did receive a letter from the Wallaces. Thank you very much. Do you have anything else to say? I mean, we will just ask the board members if they have any questions for you.
The only, I guess, I want to be respectful of your time, but so feel free to ask us questions. I mean, the other hardship or whatever, we would have to build a patio around, you know, the
patio and
spot,
and
you know, we'd have to build additional things and build out that yard. We'd rather just keep the yard as a yard and garden rather than another patio, which we don't really need. You know what I mean? Because we put it in proposing to put it right next to as part of the existing patio.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for the applicant? Hearing none, Lisa, do we have anyone on the line somewhere that wishes to comment other than the letter we received?
No emails and no comments on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you. And no comments or questions from the board members. I guess we can proceed to a motion.
I'll be glad to make a motion. We move to recommend granting a request for a 6.22 foot side yard adjoining a street spa setback variation and a variation from the requirement that a spa not be located between a principal building and a street at 1141 Sheridan Road in accordance with the plan as submitted.
Second.
All right.
Yeah.
I think this is pretty straightforward, and you know, it's interesting. I was confused until I went to the property, and I thought the shaded area was where the spa was going to go, and I thought, well, that's really odd. Why would anybody want a spa in that location? And then I said, well, gee, you know, the neighbor has like an interesting yard too, and they'd be removed. But now that I went back and rethought this, and of course it helped to have your explanation. When I drove down, I think that's 7th, I couldn't see where the spa was going to go, and that's a good thing, because if you combine the fact that it's well secluded and you'll have a fence there, I think it really is probably about the only place that you can put the spa. And so I'm very much inclined to support the variance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I agree with what Brad has said. I would say that in addition to the shape of the lot, the categorization of the streets and which one is designated the front and side streets make this a very unique situation, I can also support it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other comments from the members of the board?
Yeah, I agree that when you look at the lot, the Sheridan roadside actually looks like the front of the house. You know, it's, lot line. And where they're putting the plow looks like the back of the house. So in that case, it would be, they'd be able to do it by right. I think that the way they're shielding it, the trees that are there, really, you have to stand in specific spots.
Mr. Glattard, I think we heard most of what you said, but I think your microphone may be a little weak. We couldn't hear the latter part.
Well, I did say that when I looked at the site from the streets, the evergreens really hide the location well. And you have to stand in specific spots to see through them to support the site.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, I think we can, my comment is, as Mr. Falco and Maria have said, I can't add anything to it. It makes, and as well as Mr. Glattard, it makes a lot of sense. It's the only feasible location, and it's the circumstances, the lot configuration, the adjoining streets, all of that makes a lot of sense to locate it where it is, and I can support it. No other comments by the members of the board. I think we can take a vote.
Mr. Falcoff,
Yes.
Ms. Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Glattard,
Yes.
Ms. Norick,
Yes.
Mr. Pelican,
Yes.
Chairman Schneider.
Yes. So this goes with a positive recommendation to the Board of Trustees, and they will meet on this and include this case on the agenda on January 26th of this month.
Reinhardt, I'll move to
Appreciate
authorize.
your
Happy New
Okay,
Year.
I'll move to authorize the chairman to prepare the report and recommendation for the zoning board of appeals for case number 2021-Z-01.
Second.
Mr. Falcoff,
Yes.
Ms. Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Glattard,
Yes.
Ms. Norick,
Yes.
Mr. Pelican,
Yes.
Chairman Schneider.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Guys, Happy New Year.
Happy New
We
Year.
appreciate your
New
time.
Year.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
And
Thanks,
now,
Lisa.
Thank you.
Ms. Roberts, we proceed to the next case.
Our next case is 2021-Z1, 220 Linden Avenue. This is a request for a 2.17-foot side yard setback variation, a 30.78-foot rear yard setback variation, and a 25.53-foot rear yard below-grade stair setback variation to permit the construction of a one-story addition, a two-story addition, and a reconstructed attached garage on the legal non-conforming structure. And our applicants are here.
Thank you. Welcome, and please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the zoning board. I apologize in advance. I have not been able to get my camera to be operating, but hopefully you can hear me clearly. And Lisa has kindly agreed to present on her screen the presentation that we provided to help guide the discussion this evening. So Lisa, if you would kindly, perfect, get that up. So thank you to the members of the committee and also to Lisa Roberts and Rachel Randolph, who've been very helpful throughout the application process. My name is Julia, and I'm here with my husband, Richard, and we are the applicants requesting variances related to the property at 220 Linden Avenue. With us on the phone are Nancy Schlossberg and John Shuttleworth of S2 Architects, with whom we've been collaborating on the project for the last few years. And Lisa, if you could just turn to the next page. There is a lot of information and additional detail in the packet Lisa provided for you, and we hope that just taking a few minutes to summarize the highlights of our request will be useful. And toward that end, our goal is to summarize in the next few pages of this slide deck the issues related to the following 3 points. Why are the variances needed? What variances are being requested and why we're requesting them now? And as we go through the slides, of course, feel free to ask questions along the way. We want to make sure that this is the most efficient use of time for everyone. And on the next page of the deck is an executive summary, which is, before getting into more detail, hopefully a summary of what we're going to be covering. The primary one of which is the shape of the lot, which is a flag shape. And we think it's unusual, if not unique for Wilmette. We're not sure, but we know that the flag shape is a particular issue and can't be overcome. And you're going to be seeing that on the plat of survey in a few pages in this presentation, which illustrates the shape of the lot. But there are other examples of it in the report that Lisa provided on pages 1.1 through 1.4. The existing house and garage are already non-conforming due to this odd-shaped lot. And because of that, excuse me, we're as Lisa mentioned, we're proposing to replace and or reconstruct structures that were built and currently exist. Those structures were built in 1928. And they are problematic for reasons that we've detailed in the appendix of this presentation and in the standards of review document provided in sections 2.1 of Lisa's report. To modernize the home, we are proposing to replace or reconstruct the problem structures and add a 1-story addition. But importantly, the plans that are drawn call for minimum changes to the existing variances, which, as mentioned, exist because of the odd-shaped lot. One of our priorities throughout this process in amending the property is to do so in such a way to be architecturally in keeping with the existing structures and have a minimal visual impact to our neighbors and adjacent properties. And S2 architects are very experienced, and the plans that they've drawn are very much in keeping with that objective. We have had conversations with some of the neighbors. You may not be familiar with the house. Even though the address is 220 Linden, it doesn't face the street, and it's actually hidden behind 3 other properties on Linden. So it's not an obvious house. But we've spoken to the neighbors that are on Linden and most directly affected by our proposal to date. And we've also spoken to some of the neighbors on the other side of the alley, which are less impacted, but still we wanted to make sure everyone was aware of what we were potentially planning. And they have not expressed concerns to date. I think you've received in advance of this meeting a letter of support from one of the neighbors on Linden. That's address number 216. The residents of 222 Linden forwarded our presentation to a board member, and I'm not sure if that board member is actually on the zoning board or the village board, but they expressed that they had no problems with it as either. And we've had conversations with others, as mentioned. So that's encouraging. Turning to page 3, very briefly, why are the variances needed? We've mentioned already the flag-shaped lot. The existing home and garage are non-conforming already with respect to the minimum side yard and rear yard setbacks due to that lot shape, and therefore the proposed plans also require variances. On page 4, we've summarized from Lisa's report what variances are requested. I've reconfigured these just slightly, and we thought it would help to put into context what these requested variances are and point out that they're minimally different from what variances exist already. In fact, I think the net difference is about a 2.5-inch less or smaller variance. But if I may draw your attention to the blue and yellow columns on the right side of the page at the top, we'll walk through that data. So in blue is the number of feet that the existing structures are non-conforming in the 3 ways listed there. The 1 side yard setback and the 2 rear yard setbacks of roughly 2 feet 31 feet and 25 feet respectively. In the column next to that blue column is in yellow. That's the amount of variance requested based on the plans. And shown in the yellow column on the furthest right is the difference between the existing respective variances and the proposed variances. And you can see that there's no difference in the side yard setback. There's a small reduction in the rear yard setback by just over ½ a foot, which is highlighted in that green box, and a small increase in rear yard setback to the steps of just under ½ a foot, which is highlighted in the red box on the lower right side. So overall, the message here is that
could I interrupt for a second? Could
please,
you,
yes.
What is the rear yard? What is the rear yard in this particular lot?
Sure. So maybe advancing to the next page will actually make this clearer, and it is addressing the point that the lot is sort of a funny shape. So you can see here the plat of survey of the particular pin that is under, that is affected by this, and we can ignore, well, I guess if you can observe this flag-shaped lot, all the buildings are currently on the rear yard. Yes, thank you, Lisa, for highlighting those. So the original house, which is in that red area, was built in 1923. The addition that the most previous owners built is marked in green. We're not proposing any changes to that. What's to the left of those two structures is the two-story addition in blue that was built in 1928. And in the purple area is the attached garage that was also built in 1928. So it's those two structures that we're planning to make changes to. And in the orange is kind of the dotted orange includes the addition of a one-story addition. So as you can see, everything currently exists on the rear yard. And
Can I ask a question that's building off of Reinhardt's? In this schematic, the front yard is the 3-foot wide sidewalk. Is that correct?
yes, ma'am.
Yes.
So the 2 points that access Linden are 3 feet and 12 feet wide, and for all practical purposes are unbuildable. And
Correct.
the flag, the banner part of the lot in both cases is considered to be a rear yard.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Are there any, okay, thank you. So on the next page, this actually makes it come alive a little bit more. It is the north elevation, which is reflecting again in that dotted orange, the replacement of the two-story addition, essentially in the exact same footprint, as well as the reconstructed attached garage in that same footprint. And that's viewing the house from the alley off of 3rd Street, from the north. So that's the north elevation. On page 7 is the south elevation. Again, the orange dotted area is showing in the very front that one-story addition. That's currently basically grass and dirt. So that will be the new one-story addition, but the replacement two-story addition and the reconstructed garage exactly are in the same footprint.
Can I interrupt you for a second? If you go back to the previous slide, page 6, according to the plans, the existing has a sort of a space in between the original building and the 1928 addition. And you stated that this new addition that you highlighted is going to have the same footprint, which is not true. It actually closes off all of that area way there, doesn't it?
Yes, yes, and I did not mean to be misunderstood. It's essentially the same footprint. You are correct. There's I don't know the exact area of that gap. That is actually where 2 air conditioning compressors are and is essentially dead space. So in terms of a structural component, we thought it made sense to just connect that to the house. It makes it more kind of consistent as well with the roof.
Absolutely.
But I'm open to other questions or input from anyone else who may have questions about that. So
If I
So
may
can we go
interject,
back to that image again? And can you point on the plat where the rear yard is that we're getting the setback variation for, and where the side yard is? So I would assume the most narrow area is the side yard, is that correct? Yep. And then the rear yard, it abuts the alley?
yes,
Thank you. And I should be clear, the rear yard setback.
yes,
you.
that's correct. The space between the original structure and the two-story structure is approximately 6 feet wide by about 11'2" in depth, north-south.
I have a
Thank
question
you.
also. You said that that little gap there has your air conditioning compressors in it. Where are you intending to relocate those to?
We haven't gotten that far. It would probably be either behind the garage or behind the main building. We just haven't explored that yet. Because we're reconfiguring this, we're actually going to be reconfiguring the mechanical systems as well. So there's 2 air conditioners now. I'm assuming we would have 2 in the future as well. We just haven't, we wanted to make sure this was going to fly before we developed it further.
This is Reinhard Schneider. Can you give us a little history, if you know it, about how this came about, this particular configuration lot?
well, what we do know is that the original house was built in 1923 and the addition built in 1928. We don't have the historical records of why they decided to connect it through that relatively narrow hallway that you can see in the blue bark. I mean, we do see some evidence of a back door that appeared somewhere in that gap. So our guess, but it is a guess, is that maybe they entered the house through the back door there, and then when they built the addition, just continued the structure on. But again, it was 1928, so we don't have, all the historical records of the architectural plans from that date.
Another question, I drove down the alley and I couldn't turn around. I had to back up again to 3rd Street. How will you stage the construction? Will you allow this 12-foot strip on Linden? Will that be the construction route? Or how will you plan to do that?
Well, I don't think we've gotten that far yet, but we know there's been significant construction on houses recently on Greenleaf. There's been sort of basically kind of a house rebuilt, not quite from scratch, but virtually from scratch, and the construction generally has taken place in the alley. We obviously, that we assume that the same process would take place that way.
And this is Richard Ford. It's also possible that construction crews could use the 12-foot access from Linden to the front yard if that were an issue.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, hearing none. I know that you I don't know how long you've lived in this house, and this was done in 1926. I assume that the reason that they have this 3-foot and 12-foot totaling 15 feet of frontage on Linden was required for them to kind of legally plat that lot in the back, I would think, because without that, I'm just facing an alley would not have been appropriate or legal at the time.
Right.
That's
I
just
mean, One bit of anecdote that we're aware of, just again through kind of anecdotal history of the property, it actually does face east. But our understanding is that the house was actually built for the daughter of the owner of number 222, house number 222 on Linden. So the previous owners that we bought the house from described that as their knowledge of the history. And so maybe that's why, you know, back in the day when it was kind of farmhouse, they built the house behind for his daughter.
Thank you for that background. Any other questions or comments for the applicant?
Well,
Yes. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's
Go
okay.
ahead.
No, I thought you meant from me rather than.
Oh.
Please proceed if you have.
This is Ryrie Pelleton. I'm curious, if we look at the plat there, if the architects could probably address this best. If you built forward onto this large expanse to the east of the house, you wouldn't need a variance at all.
I think we would still be technically in the rear yard setback.
Right.
Because Linden is considered the front yard, and everything, basically the entire house is in the required rear yard.
Even the house's, what functions as the house's front yard is considered to be rear yard, Rory.
Yes.
Rory.
And this property actually has 2 pins. So both of the pins are flag shaped. So the first flag, if you will, on the left-hand side of the page is the rear yard and that narrow sidewalk. And then the second pin is that second flag-shaped lot and the narrow area out to Linden as well. So because the house faces east, and the house has always faced east, and the only way that we can't build to the east because you'd have to completely flip the house. So the front entrance of the house is actually through that front door. Yeah, exactly where Lisa's hand marking is right there.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for the applicant?
Well, my comment, I mean, I think it's a good design. You know, I appreciate it, and it is, I have to say, makes the baseball diamond shaped lot we were talking about in the previous case look like the height of normalcy. I have never seen a lot like this ever before.
I won't take that personally.
It's unique, it's different, it's awfully hard to find. So I think I can support what you're doing here. You know, there are questions and concerns, but it seems like you've got a good plan. That's all.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Roberts, do we have anyone else that, other than the letter that we received from a neighbor, do we have anyone else that wishes to comment on this case?
Let's see here. There are no comments in YouTube and no emails, so I think we're good. I know the applicant had not completed their presentation yet, but there's no other comment.
No, that's fine. It was just wrapping up with the summary, but the main things have already been raised. So we just do, you know, appreciate your consideration of the proposal and thank you for participating.
No, I didn't want to interrupt you. If you have something else to say, please go ahead.
No, not at all. It was just to summarize what we've already described. The crazy lot shape is the issue. And so we're just trying to work with the lot. It is what it is, and we're trying to work with what it is and appreciate your consideration of the proposal.
Thank you. There are no other comments, and we haven't heard anything from anyone else other than the letter from the neighbor. I think we're ready.
And we did have an email from a different neighbor that said she'd forwarded the proposal to a board member. I'm not sure if that board member was on the zoning board or the village board, but they said that they had no problems with it, which I believe I forwarded, Lisa, to you, the additional comments that 222 had added. I know they didn't write a formal letter of support, but just so you have it for the record.
It will be in the record. I think we're ready for a motion.
I move to recommend granting a request for a 2.17-foot side yard setback variation, a 30.78 rear yard setback variation, and a 25.53-foot rear yard below grade stair setback variation to permit the construction of a one-story addition, a two-story addition, and a reconstructed attached garage on the legal non-conforming structure at 220 Linden Avenue in accordance with the plans submitted.
Second. We need a second.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
I can support this application. The flagged shape of the lot and the siting of the house on what is considered to be the rear of the lot really gives them very little wiggle room, gives them no wiggle room. No matter what they did, they would need to seek a variance. And I very much appreciate the fact that most of the new construction is within the footprint of the current house, and those portions that are outside the footprint I make for more usable space in the house. And as Ryrie already commented, the design is very pleasing, well done. So I can support this.
Well, I don't have a whole lot to add. There was a concern from one of the neighbors about wood burning versus gas fireplace.
No, that was a different case.
That is a different case? I'm sorry.
That's Elmwood Avenue.
I'm sorry, I got that confused. Well, we'll talk about that one next. Yeah, as I mentioned before, I think this is a really strange lot and difficult to work with. I think the design is good, and I think that Reinhardt's comment about the or question about construction is very well taken in terms of the difficulty of accessing this lot. And so I would say that some serious consideration of that, and maybe communication with the neighbors to figure out who and what and how is in order, as is figuring out where you're going to put those air conditioning units, because you don't want to have to come back for another variance for the air conditioning units. So that's all I have to say, and I can support this.
I would say that when I looked at it on a plan, I was concerned about the two neighbors on Linden Street and how you back up for them, and how this would affect them. When I did go to the site, I saw that their house garages were in that place. You can see the change. The one-story portion is behind the garages, which is a good thing for those neighbors. So I support it.
I support it also for the reasons that Maria and Ryrie mentioned. It really does, in the end, when you look at the new construction and the fact that it sits on the footprint of the original house, almost anything they do is going to have a problem, but they're making so little changes to the footprint that I can't think of any reason to object. So I'm supportive.
Yeah, I too can support the proposal. I think the peculiarity of the lot, does really limit what they can do and lends support for those variances.
Thank you. So can I. I think the buildable area without any variance would create a strange looking house. The situation, like the last case, is unique. The lot is unique. The whole configuration, access, and so forth are all unique, and I think what they're proposing is reasonable. It brings the house into a more contemporary living lifestyle requirements, and I can support it. So can we go and have a vote?
Ms. Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Pelletin,
Yes.
Ms. Norick,
Yes.
Mr. Gotthard,
Yes.
Mr. Felkoff,
Yes.
Chairman Schneider.
Yes. And this will go with as a positive recommendation to the Board of Trustees, who will meet on January 26th. They might want to discuss this. It might be as interesting to them as it was to us, so you may want to be there. And thank you very much. And good
We'd be
luck.
happy to. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I'll move
I
to
move to
authorize the chairman.
authorize the chairman to prepare the report and recommendation for the Zoning Board of Appeals for case number 2021 Z-1.
I guess I'll second that. I seconded Maria's other move, so
Ms. Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Pelletin,
yes.
Ms. Norick,
Yes.
Mr. Gotthard,
Yes.
Mr. Felkoff,
Yes.
Chairman Schneider.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. And
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Ms. Roberts, can you call the next case?
Our next case is 2021 Z2, 1605 Elmwood Avenue. This is a request for a 2.49-foot side yard setback variation, a 1-foot combined side yard setback variation, a 26.8 square foot excuse me, rear yard total impervious surface coverage variation, and 160.8 square foot rear yard structure impervious surface coverage variation to permit the construction of a 2-story addition, window modifications on the existing home, and a detached garage on the legal non-conforming structure. And our applicants are here.
Thank you. Mr. and Mrs. Brown, please proceed.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to our application. We've been residents, my wife Jennifer and I, for 25 years. I've also served on the Housing Commission and currently on the Canal Shores Governance Committee for the golf course. And we were invited to move to this home by our neighbor, Judy and Lance Klein, when the house was being sold. So I think they're also on the call in support. But basically, the home is built in 1915, from what we understand. It is non-conforming in that it's too close to the west side of the property. And the hardships all stem from the fact that the lot is small and the house is even smaller. I think the house total square footage as it exists right now is 1,240 some square feet. We're requesting the construction of a modest addition. Actually, the addition is sympathetic to the neighbor next door. Their addition, it's a 1-story addition, but we are maintaining the same basic footprint as the neighbor in terms of their 1-story addition to the rear of their yard. Our addition does go up to a 2nd story to allow for a 3-bedroom home on the 2nd floor, and adds a master bathroom and closet room to it. And then the garage, as it sits now, is a small 2-car garage that's, I believe, is either 16 or 18 square feet wide. That just won't accommodate modern cars and equipment as exists today. The house is rather small, so even with the modest addition, so the garage request is to be a bit larger, still smaller than our neighbor to the east, but which is a 3-car garage. But this garage would allow some storage of garden tools and bikes and so forth, and would allow us to park our cars in the garage as we do now without having to force one of the cars onto the street. So the hardship all stems from the fact that the existing house is small and is located where it's located. I mean, if we had our choice, it would be centered on the lot, but it's off towards the west side. Part of our plan is also removing part of the sidewalk that runs on the western part of the lot, so we could get even more grass and impervious surface. We did talk to our neighbors to the west, Bruce and Janet, and let them know that we were also concerned about how close the house is to their house, and promised them that we do everything in our power to grade it so that the water doesn't collect between our houses, because any water next to their house would also be water next to our house since they are so close. So appreciate your looking at this request. I think that if you have any questions, love to hear those and proceed.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll open it up.
Yeah.
For questions.
I have a question right off the bat, and that is that on the drawing of what's proposed on 1.7, the site drawing, you have a concrete patio that adjoins the house, which is quite sizable, and then another one that is by the garage, and there's no sidewalk indicated in between the two. So how do you propose to get from the garage to the house when you need to do so, and from the house to the patio where the fireplace is?
We actually would, what we have in our prior house on Elmwood was actually flagstone pavers, or not pavers, flagstone. So we would actually, we're trying to eliminate and make the house a cottage look to it, as you can see from the drawing. And we really don't want concrete. We are planning to use steppers on the east side, and the concrete patio really, in truth, will be will either be crushed granite or would be some sort of brick, and not concrete. That's not our desire.
Well, it sounds very attractive. It would add in additional impervious surface to the calculation, and that's one of the reasons why I asked. It's sort of an omission that jumped out at me, that there was no connection between the two buildings or the two patios. And I don't know, unfortunately, and Lisa can speak to this, but I'm fairly certain that the crushed granite or brick, unfortunately, are also count as impervious surface. So you don't get any bonus for that versus concrete, unfortunately.
Lisa and I talked about that, and I did understand that in advance of the meeting, that whether it's granite or whether it's brick, it still counts as impervious surface. So yeah, that was
removing that sidewalk along the side of the house. It certainly helps to reduce your quantity of impervious surface, and a sidewalk connecting the two patios would certainly be a lot less than the dimension of that sidewalk if you took the whole thing out along the side of the house.
Yeah, we remove that.
That would help that. The other thing is that one of the things that we need to consider is whether this affects the light and air to the other houses. And I'm glad that you talked to the neighbor to the west. The neighbor to the east, though, I don't want to say that this is going to dwarf that house, but it certainly will block a lot of light coming from the west in the afternoon.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. They're also on the call, and Judy Klein, who is our neighbor to the east, who told us about this house to begin with. That's how we came to purchase it. She is the designer that helped with the plan. So I'd let her speak to that, but I believe they are in support of the plan since Judy herself drew it up.
Yeah. We are on the call if you have any questions.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant?
I have one question, and I want to thank Ryrie for raising the issue of the sidewalk or the lack thereof between the house and the garage, because it drew my attention then to the concrete patio that's being proposed by the garage. And just doing the math, I guess I want to understand the purpose of the concrete patio in front of the garage, given that you propose such a large patio directly behind the house. I was saying earlier, the math, if the elimination of the concrete patio by the garage would mean that no impervious surface variance would be required. The concrete patio by the garage would measure 198 square feet. You're seeking a variance of 160 square feet for rear yard impervious surface. You could get rid of that patio, build a sidewalk all the way from the concrete patio by the house to the garage and still not require a variance. So I guess I want to understand the necessity of the patio by the garage.
We just need some sort of landing area between because towards the side, there is a doorway, the service door to the garage. And so we needed some sort of landing pad for firewood or whatever you might put there, a bike or furniture or such.
I would assume furniture would go on the patio by the house.
Right, but to be fair, on the garage, we're also proposing a brick fireplace, so there would be area there for seating as well. But it doesn't have to. You're right. I think that's a fair point that you're making. That it doesn't have to be as big as as is drawn on the drawing here.
And I would like to suggest that if you're going to have a backyard fireplace, you could just as easily put it on the house, on the patio by the house, and really eliminate the need for this patio, given the amount of impervious surface that's being created here.
Yeah, I mean, I think in fairness to your point, I think we could scale that back maybe to half the size, but I do think we need some sort of landing area, just to service the garage and the home. We're dealing with a home, like I said in the opening, where we don't have a lot of room for storage. And so having an apron like this would be of great benefit to the small house.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just clarify a point, in terms of the rear yard variations, the patio, only 3 feet projecting from the back of the house of the patio is in the rear yard and counting. So it could be removed, and that may, could impact the total variation, but the variation for the structure coverage is solely the garage and the chimney. And that you just can't get 2 cars, with
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Could you, Ms. Roberts, could you repeat that for me, please?
Sure. The patio, only the 3 feet on the garage side of the patio is in the rear yard. So if you removed the patio, you could potentially get rid of the 26 square foot total variation, but the structure coverage is solely due to the garage and the chimney, and you just can't get a 2-car garage and conform. It's only allowed 333 square feet of structure coverage.
So that's really then part of the hardship of the lot, that you cannot have a garage without having variance for impervious structure coverage.
It's my understanding that the impervious and building coverage for the entire site by calculation is also over. Is that not correct, Lisa?
That is not correct. We do not have a total lot impervious coverage limit. It's strictly by the required yards. So 1 for the front yard, 3 for the rear yard, and then the sides together. And so the patio that's attached to the house is largely within the buildable area and basically doesn't count as coverage against anything. Obviously, there's grading issues and compliance with the permit, but for zoning, it's not doesn't count against anything.
I'd like to add that we are really attempting to be sympathetic to the neighbor to the east in terms of what we're building. It's very modest in scope of the addition. We're talking less than 1,800 square feet. So we are trying to just be totally within what the neighborhood style and limits are. We are not trying to build a McMansion on this home. We are just trying to be sympathetic in terms of size and style to the neighbors.
Could you talk a little bit about, in terms of being sympathetic to the neighbors, you talked about steps that you were going to take to try and prevent water from migrating from your property to the neighbor to the west in particular. But there's not a lot of pervious surface left, certainly in the rear yard. What's your plan for water mitigation?
Well, we were actually friendly with the prior renter of the property, and they did say that there's some water that gathered between the house and the garage. And that's why we didn't want to kind of take on remodeling the current garage, because I think when we're doing our grading and landscaping, we're going to be sensitive to how the water pools, and we're going to be particularly sensitive to our east and west neighbors to make sure that the water doesn't go into towards either of their lots, because the lots here are so narrow, 34 feet, that we can't shed water from our yard towards their yard, because in essence, we're in the same yard. Any water that travels to their yard would travel back to our yard. So we have to, by removing the current garage and doing proper grading towards the back, that's how we would mitigate the water. Plus, as you can see, this is, hate to admit that this is our fifth house in Wilmette. Each one we've managed to do the construction without offending any neighbors and having any complaints to the village. I'm a son of an architect and sympathetic to those issues. The fact that it's not centered on the lot really bothers me, but we don't want to build a new home. So I think we're going to achieve that by some of the materials we choose, and also by the fact that we're so tight on this lot that we have no other choice but to engineer it in a way that the water doesn't pool towards their yard and then back to ours.
As long as we're talking about pervious and impervious surfaces, let me ask you, just to the east of the new garage is about a 9-foot wide space. What do you plan to do with that space?
We didn't have any plan for that space. We're not going to pave it. We're not going to do anything with it. It may be a vegetable garden or grass, who knows?
So I
think
I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but in terms of
the current house, because the house is loaded towards the west, so it kind of follows that cement. It's some symmetry there, but certainly it could be centered, but there's no great design to store or do anything with the 9 feet to the east.
So, maybe Mr. Brown, do you intend to remove that pavement to the east of the house that connects the front to the back?
Yeah, it doesn't serve any purpose. It's so narrow over there, and I think it would help our neighbor to the west concern. So when Bruce and I talked the other day, I said that that's something that we would do. We would look to move that concrete. It's very old. It's probably not. The front walk is in bad condition. I haven't been down that side walk. It doesn't seem to serve any purpose. So
you intend to have no, not paved, but any kind of connection other than across the lawn between the front of the house and the rear yard?
Yeah, I mean, we might have to come back and get a stepping stone variation, but no, nothing significant.
Also, have you even though the village doesn't give you a whole lot of credit for pervious pavements, do you intend to consider those?
Well, like I said, we would definitely, if you saw in our home at 1112 Elmwood, we used brick and natural materials. There was no concrete added. In fact, we removed all the concrete in the backyard when we redid the garage.
But is the brick pervious? Because this way, is it?
No, it doesn't count, according to Lisa. Brick pavers don't count as in, and they don't help you, but obviously it was of great comfort to Bruce and Janet next door when we said we would build the patio out of brick or crushed granite.
Is the brick set in cement or in sand?
In sand, yeah, in sand. Just like on Elmwood. Just on our old house on Elmwood. That was done by Chalet and they set it in sand.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant?
If I could interject something, can they hear me?
Yes.
This is Judy Klein, the neighbor to the east. And one thing I wanted to note was, one of the things that I really appreciate, first of all, they're doing a really beautiful renovation that I think is going to enhance the neighborhood. This house has been a rental for many years and it's in disrepair. So I think this is going to be a huge improvement to our neighborhood and our block.
Thank you, Judy. Can you give your full name and address, please, for the record?
Sure, it's Judy Klein, and the address is 1601 Elmwood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else, Ms. Roberts, that wishes to speak on this application?
No one in the YouTube chat and no emails, except for the 2 emails that we received earlier today.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Since I raised it in the last case mistakenly, we did have that one email about wood burning fireplace versus gas. Do you have any comment about that?
Yeah, we haven't specified the type. This is the first I heard of it today. I am concerned about, the environment. I do have an electric car, and that's part of the reason why we have to plug it in the back and you actually use the garage. But really the chimney in the back was more for an aesthetic, to make it look like complete the cottage look to it. So we would explore gas as well as wood burning, or maybe a combination. But I'm sensitive to what the neighbors, 2 of the neighbors have said, in fact, and but we haven't explored what type of insert we put in at this point. And I don't even know what the utilization rate honestly will be. It was more for an aesthetic.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? And having heard from a neighbor, and we've had some correspondence, but nothing else. So I think we can entertain a motion.
I can make a motion. Let me find it. I move to recommend granting a request for a 2.49 foot side yard setback variation, a 1.0 foot combined side yard setback variation, a 26.8 square foot or 2.82% rear yard total impervious surface coverage variation, and a 160.8 square foot or 16.89% rear yard structure impervious surface coverage variation to permit the construction of a 2-story addition, window modifications on the existing home, and detached garage on the legal non-conforming structure at 1605 Elmwood Avenue in accordance with the plan submitted.
The second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Maria. Mr. Pelleton.
Yes, well, I was concerned when I looked at the site plan about the impervious surface that was being created here. by the extension of the house and the two patios and the larger garage. But that's, some of that is certainly by right, so that the amount of rear yard total surface impervious coverage is actually fairly small. I do understand the interest in a larger garage, although I have to say that just because you want to store stuff and put your car in there doesn't automatically give you and because your neighbors have a 3-car garage. I mean, by that reasoning, all of us would have 3-car garages or 4-car garages or whatever the biggest garage happens to be. But I think it's a good design. It's a small lot. It's an odd situation. And if you can do this without causing the neighbors any harm by taking care of the water problems, I think it's a good project and I can support it.
I can also support it, the fact that the house is sited on the west half of the lot and that the lot is as small as it is, creates practical difficulties for anyone who would live there. I think this is a sensitive plan, and the design is going to fit nicely in the neighborhood, and I can support it.
Anyone else wishes to comment before we take the vote?
I can support it as well. I found it to be a modest addition that they're requesting, and they really are constrained by a fairly small lot.
I'll add, I agree with what everybody has said. Certainly the side yard setback variation is understandable in light of where the house currently sits. I continue to be still a little bit troubled by the impervious surface coverage. Certainly I understand the garage, but it's that concrete patio that's attached to the garage that just sort of pushes me towards the edge, but I'll still support the proposed variation.
I agree with what everybody said, and I do feel that the garage is pretty generous. I wish I had one that big, although making it a few feet smaller really wouldn't change its impact to the neighborhood.
Thank you. I too, I think an attempt to bring these smaller houses to improve them and change the floor plan to fit the current lifestyle and the current needs better, I think is a good goal to have, and I think you've achieved it here on a very small lot. I do also, I'm a little bit concerned about, this is located east of Ridge, and the runoff would go into the single sanitary storm sewer that we have on that side of the village, and to the extent we can mitigate that in whatever means possible would be extremely helpful. And I would ask the applicant, even though we are not I obviously can't require it, to do whatever he can to mitigate the runoff on this from your improvements to the alley.
Yep.
And I can support it. So can we have a vote, please?
Mr. Pelletin,
Yes.
Ms. Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Felkoff,
Yes.
Mr. Gotthard,
Yes.
Ms. Norick,
Yes.
Chairman Schneider.
Yes. So this goes with a positive recommendation to the Village Board of Trustees, and they will meet on January 26th, and you may want to be there. And thank you very much and good luck.
Thank you so much.
I think somebody needs to make
Yep.
another motion.
I move to authorize the chairman to prepare the report and recommendation for the Zoning Board of Appeals for case number 2021 Z02.
I second.
Ms. Norick,
Yes.
Ms. Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Felkoff,
Yes.
Mr. Gletard,
Yes.
Mr. Pelletin,
Yes.
Chairman Schneider.
Yes. We have one more item on our agenda. We need a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll
Move
make a
to
motion to approve
approve.
the meeting minutes of Wednesday, November 18th, 2020.
Second.
Mr. Pelletin,
Yes.
Ms. Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Felkoff,
Yes.
Mr. Gletard,
Yes.
Ms. Norick,
Yes.
Chairman Schneider.
Yes. Thank you. Now, I think we need a motion to adjourn. If, unless, is there any, I think I have to do this every time. I don't know if there is. Is there anyone out there that wishes to comment on anything?